Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. The time's just gone 6 o'clock. Welcome along. And if you've been at work all day or you've been living under a rock today, Forest announced this afternoon that Steve Cooper has been relieved of his duties as head coach tonight. It is a decision that many of us might have been expecting, but we didn't expect it really to come out of the blue today. But after all the media speculation this morning, Steve Cooper has left Nottingham Forest as head coach. We'll just touch on the club statement before we introduce the guests. Forest released a statement which read, Cooper departs the City Ground, having played an integral part in Forest's return to the Premier League, cementing himself firmly into the club's rich history after guiding the Reds back to England's top flight. Evangelos Marinakis went on to thank Cooper for his contribution, his achievements, and said that he will always be welcome at the football club. Media links today also reporting that Nuno Espirito Santo will take over as fees and contracts are currently being agreed as we speak. Joining me on the panel, two Forest fans, Steve Oldham and Ross Levy, two people that have actually sat behind me at games for a long, long time since I was very young. Steve, let's start with you. What have you made to the decision? Incredibly sad decision, and it's quite an emotional day today as Steve Cooper departs Forest, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But, you know, these, like I said earlier, these things always come to an end, whether it came to an end today or I thought would have heard something over the weekend after the Spurs game. But as time went on, I thought, okay, they might give him a little bit longer. Look, Steve Cooper will always be a legend at the club. In my eyes, top three in managers that I've witnessed, and that goes for Cloughy and Frank Clark. What he did for the club was brilliant, but unfortunately we're in a business where there's not much sentiment, Max, in this game, and you know, this is where we are, and I think all of us wish him all the best, and I think if we ever saw him back at the City Ground, we'd welcome him with open arms. On a level, so the younger ones can most probably understand. I think it's a bit like if Stuart Pearce walked into the ground. He has that aura about him, you know, and I think same with Cooper. I think Steve Cooper will have the same. I'll be indebted to him because what he did for my two younger ones. They've fallen in love with the club, and it is a sad day, but you know, we all got to move on, and we've got to get behind the new man now. Decisions been made. Let's get behind the new man.
Yeah, the new man, of course, hasn't been officially appointed yet, but Nuno Espirito Santo has been in talks with Forest for the last few days, and owner Evangelos Marinakis. We are live on Facebook, Nottingham Forest News, and YouTube for the next half an hour or so, so feel free to get your comments in. Jack says, feel like Cooper's papered over the cracks at the club with him gone. I really worry for the progress and collective feeling at the club. Tony says, gutted, but it was inevitable. Our record was abysmal. Dorset Red says absolutely gutted. Gripper69 says Cooper sealed his place in Forest history as a legend. And I suppose he did as well, Steve, while we try and wait for Ross to get his connection back, as these things do happen. Well, in fact, Ross is back. He's magically appeared in a new place. Ross, what did you make of the decision? Just like Steve said there, it's such an emotional day, but yes, at some point we expected it with the run of form we've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, so many tabs, reading so many different articles and response for that. But yeah, I mean, I echo what Steve said. It's a very sad day, and what Steve Cooper has done for the club, and the city has been, absolutely remarkable. Certainly, for as long as I've been watching the club, he has galvanized the fans and really created a real spirit and energy at the City Ground that I've certainly not seen before. But the record is unfortunately now speaks for itself, and it is time now for the club to get some results and to do so in a professional manner as well. There's been a lot of energy around the manager, around the team. They need to now just find a way just to get some points on the board, and the emotion sort of needs to perhaps take that pause, because ultimately they've got to play Bournemouth, who are in great form at the moment, and can't let the emotions run away from them, and they've got to turn up and try and get something from a Premier League game, which is no easy thing, but it's got to be done.
It's got to be done indeed. Just over 330 people watching. If you want to get your comments in to me, Steve or Ross, you're more than welcome to do so. Do you agree with the decision? Do let us know. Lee says this is a massive mistake. This isn't all down to Steve Cooper. This boils down to poor recruitment, that other coaches and the players need to have a hard look at themselves, and finally the owner and his son. That is the problem, Steve. A lot of people have talked about today is that, of course, Cooper departs, and we're so thankful for what this man's done. I've had the pleasure of attending games with you, Steve, for a long, long time. We attended so many in that promotion season, and he really just got what the city was about, didn't he? And I think that's why it's so emotional today. But then in the same sense, a lot of people are angry at Forest and angry potentially at the owner, because this doesn't all boil down to him, does it? As that comment just said, this lies on the recruitment and the players we brought in as well.
Yeah, some of the recruitment I get, but listen, I'm a Steve Cooper fan before anyone starts shooting me down. Okay, I'm a Steve Cooper fan, I'll always will be. But let me put this out to those people. Okay, the recruitment didn't cost us 2 points against Luton when we 2-0 up with 13 minutes to go, and the manager brings 4 players off, and we draw. The recruitment didn't cost us when we're 2-0 up at Man U and we lose 3-2. Okay. Now I get what people say. This is about a result business, and we're all in it. Okay. We're all in it. What Steve Cooper did and took this club, he didn't just take this club, he grabbed it by the scruff of the neck. He galvanized the fans. I mean, what were we having? I mean, I think us three were there that night when we lost 2-0 to Middlesbrough. Can you remember it? 2-0 to Middlesbrough.
Remember
that
it.
Dreaded night. Yeah. What was there? Was there 18, 19,000 there or something like that?
Yeah, the
Steve
attendance had
Cooper,
dropped
within about a few weeks, had got us up to 28,000. He galvanised the city. And I think I said to you, Max, did I not say to you in October, we'll make the playoffs that year? And we'll go through by, was it one of my famous one-liners? And I got
Mystic
it right.
Steve. Mystic
Yeah.
Steve.
So let's not get wrong here. I don't think there's many people that are going to be anti-Steve Cooper out of Forest, but it's a result business. And unfortunately, 1 win out of 13, 2 away wins out of 24. Yeah. The owner does not want to go back to the Championship. We're coming up to a new transfer window. All right. I just saw it. If it wasn't going to be today or this week, it would have been before January. I think the owners have made their mind up. I think we all agree on that. The owners have made their mind up. But he's done a fantastic job, and I think he's great. And I wish him all the best, and he will be a success. And that's it.
Yeah, he certainly will be. And I do think he'll be able to walk in to a Premier League job or a very high Championship job indeed. Keep your comments coming. Gavin says someone mentions coaches. Well, it was Cooper's decision to have an inexperienced backroom team. Andrew says here, genuinely the best manager we've had for over a decade. This will come back to bite us. Patrick says, how much longer could we have gone with Cooper? Our away form was poor. That's the concerning thing this season, wasn't it, Ross? That not only we saw poor away form last season, but we saw very poor home form that was beginning to mount. 3 losses on the bounce at home for Forest, 1 win in 13, 2 away wins in 28, and a win ratio of 18%. When we look at football as a results-driven business, surely Marinakis had to make this decision.
Yeah, and the away form is something that has he faced in every single press conference in a game away from home that he did, and for all the improvement by comparison to the start of last season, Unfortunately, the results weren't there. And okay, Crystal Palace, it was a 0-0. Arguably, they should have just pushed on a little bit further to try and got the victory there. Same really with Wolves last week. I don't know whether you guys think perhaps he will look back and regret his approach to away games. Certainly, also at the tail end of last season as well. Brentford away back in April. Danilo's goal, and then it was two error-based sort of goals that meant that Brentford took the point. I just wonder whether he will look back and regret that.
Yeah, that is probably something, you're right, Ross, that he will look back at. When we talk about Steve Cooper as a man, Steve, I had the pleasure of meeting him not once, but twice, interviewing him once, and just also spending some time with him. And he seemed to take a real interest in every fan, in every person that was associated with Forest in any way, whether that was someone that would commentate on Forest, report on Forest, or just a fan that attended games. He really got he got the feeling of Nottingham as a city, didn't he? And I wonder if that's something that we're going to miss in time to come, Steve.
Yeah, I think we'll miss that. Like I said, I said earlier, Max, he galvanised everything about the club, the city. What did he say when Forest played? The city gets together, and he did that. And I'm sorry, no one can tell me any other answer than that. Steve Cooper did that. We are going to miss that. I think the new manager, whoever it is, has got one act to follow. And I said it to you earlier, Max, in an earlier telephone conversation. He's got no honeymoon period. He's got to hit the ground. He's got to hit the ground running, because the fans, are going to, they love Cooper. But yeah, Steve Cooper galvanised this club. He took it, and we'll as fans, we're going to be indebted to that for him, because he got us back to the promised land that we dreamt about.
Yeah, he did.
Add to that, Steve, if that's okay as well, is Steve Cooper, Rob Edwards at Luton, Gareth Southgate, all a model of young managers that have come through the FA coaching system recently that I believe have really done their homework on how to do that and how to galvanise fans and how to get to really not just to coach, but also to deal with the media, to deal with the expectations of the fans as well. And I think it's been a fascinating model and case study for how to really, a manager, any aspiring managers coming through the FA coaching system now, like Cooper has been, how to not just, as I've said, to be that coach, but also to really galvanise the fans as well, because that does breed results. And you see, Rob Edwards does very similar, fist pumps and with that connection there. And so I just think it's been a really interesting to watch how Cooper has interacted with the media. Even after Wolves, he said, Friday night, he was well rehearsed in being able to to be able to interact with the fans through the media. And as Steve said, it's actually for any manager coming in, they need to take a leaf from that book really, and not just coach the players, but also to coach the fans, to get us behind them as well. Because as you say, Steve, as well, that Middlesbrough game is a useful reference point. It can't get to that where people are shouting at Marinakis in the box, and there's that sort of toxic atmosphere. If we've learned anything from it, is that we certainly need to keep getting to listen very carefully to what the managers wants us to be as fans, and create that atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. And whoever does come in really has to hit the ground running. Of course, Nuno Espirito Santo, heavily linked tonight. If you've just joined us, we're live on Garibaldi Red and Nottingham Forest News, discussing the departure of Steve Cooper this afternoon. Darren says in the comments, gutted. We'll always remember the great memories, though. Cooper brought belief back to the club and to the fans. Paul said he took over the team bottom of the championship and took them up the season. If the board were told that, they would have laughed, kept them up. If we hadn't gone up that first season, where would would we be now? We were worse at this stage last season, should have been given to the end of the season. Individual errors are not down to the managers, and players need to have a look at themselves and hold their hands up. Let's move to the future, the future after Steve Cooper, which feels odd to be talking about. And Nuno Espirito Santo linked heavily. Steve, a manager that did incredibly well in his time at Porto, Portuguese manager, and then, of course, took over Wolves in the Championship, got them promoted, champions of the Championship, and then he finished with Wolves 7th twice, and took them to the latter stages of the Europa League. Is this an appointment, Steve, that you think the Marinakis family are thinking will be long-term for Forest, and will be hoping that not only can he get some results this season, but also look to the future and hopefully have him into European success, which the Marinakis family always talk about?
Well, if it is him, Max, I think it's a must-win game for him on Saturday straight away. I don't think there's going to be much of a honeymoon period. Look, he was a good manager at Wolves. He did remarkably well. I don't think we can go too much on the Tottenham thing, because I think there was a few things going off in the background there that didn't quite go well. All I can say is, this is if this is who it is, this is who it is, and this is who we get behind. I think us three here, we do not want to return to the Championship. I don't think we will. I'll be honest with you. I think he will get us up the league. And he's got 3 tough games, obviously Bournemouth Saturday, and then Newcastle and Man U. But yeah, if you put Steve Cooper to one side, I think this is going to move it. It's going to move us forward, because I think overall we have to move forward. We only had to lose on Saturday, Max, and Luton win, and then we are in big trouble. So yeah. That could still happen, obviously. But yeah, I think we've got to as fans, accept that this is who we've got now, if it becomes announced.
Yes, he's in talks with Marinakis, according to reports, this afternoon, and will arrive into the City Ground later on tonight, flying from his home in Portugal. Also, as well, I think one thing to kind of touch on, Ross, is kind of his departure today, Steve Cooper. It kind of all came out the blue. Of course, we'd been expecting this for weeks, but this was reported this morning. It was reported last night that Nuno Espirito Santo was in talks with Marinakis, and then it kind of all came out this morning. And then before you know it, kind of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock this afternoon, he was gone. Difficult question. But for a manager that's done so much in the 2 years he's been at the football club, for the club to leak stuff to the media and for it to be in the papers before it was officially announced, do you think that's disrespectful, or do you think that's just part of the modern game that we kind of have to accept these days?
I think Steve would have seen, for example, the lanyard left outside at Fulham. And from what we gather as well, there wasn't a positive dialogue between the two at the moment. So I think if he had heard about the comments about chatting with Nuno, I don't think it would have come as any surprise to him. And he's always struck me as somebody that's very sincere, in the sense that it hasn't been about him. And, it was his birthday the other week, wasn't it? And the club didn't post, celebrating that, because he requested it was not about him. It was about the greater good for the football club. So I think it would have been very focused on preparing the team in the best possible way for what is a must-win game against Bournemouth. And also what I think is just interesting as well about Nuno is that he's been out of work for a bit of time, and Olympiacos have recently changed the manager. They opted for Carlos Carvajal. Again, with a bit of experience in English football as well. So I'm sure that the Marinakis family have had a sort of almost an interchangeable list really between the clubs of potential next managers. And just one thing I will say about Nuno, which I think is should he be the next manager as well, is that from what I recall, he's a passionate guy. And I think that's really important because, I mean, the Forest fan base is definitely one of the most passionate in the Premier League. I seem to recall back in the Championship, there was a game against Cardiff where it all sort of kicked off. And I think Nuno went, running and celebrating right in the face of Neil Warnock. So, I mean, what's not to love about that? Obviously we hope to never encounter Neil Warnock, certainly in the Premier League or in the Championship. But, a sense that there's going to be somebody that is going to care. We're not going to get somebody that's suited and booted and quite mooted on the touchline. I think it'll come in with a bit of passion, and you'd hope with a point to prove in the Premier League, given how it went with Spurs. And the final thing I'll just say about Nuno as well, it's all speculative, but he's got a bit of experience working with some of these players. He'll know Morgan Gibbs-White. He'll probably know of Bolly, and he will have had some experience working with those players. So at least he's not coming in and going, I don't know who any of these guys are. And if you can get a couple of people on board straight away and say, look, I'm relying on you against Bournemouth to play, to perform, that's an extra 10% straight off.
Yeah, it is. Let's hope Neil Warnock's not listening to this podcast, Ross.
Well, he's welcome to get in touch, and
you are, Neil. You are. Tell us your thoughts on the situation.
He'll want the job.
Yeah, he probably would. This comment reads, keep him coming, by the way, on Facebook and YouTube, Garibaldi Red. Nuno built a strong connection with Wolves and their fans with a high win ratio. Sad to see Steve go, but realistically, he's not the only one who can do that, and results were very poor. Steve, just like Ross mentioned there, he's had previous relationships, possibly with Morgan Gibbs-White, and Willy Bolly featured in his squad a lot. And something that hasn't been talked about is that he's Portuguese. Forest have a lot of Brazilian players. So this is an option, and a solid option, really, when you look at it from the Marinakis family, that it kind of works. Do you expect him to turn it round straight away, Steve? You said there it's a must-win game on Saturday before it could get a little bit toxic as such. But this won't be an easy fix as well, will it?
No. I mean, you've got to understand two things. I mean, I'll just go back 20 seconds on what Ross said. Steve Cooper wasn't told today. Steve Cooper knew last night before all this broke out. They'd have said we're changing whatever, and he'd have known, and then the media it'd have been kept on a tab on it. The thing that I have to say in all this, and what I will say is about this, is that I think he will get us going, in the right direction. Whether that starts on Saturday, because what have you got? You got 3 days. What day are we? Tuesday today. So he'll start when he's coming in Wednesday. So he's got Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with the players. If you listen to people on social media, Morgan Gibbs-White couldn't stand him, all that. But hey, just let that fly over your head. We don't know that. So for me, yes, I think he will turn it around. And I also actually think one thing that no one has said this. I think the players will want to put in a performance on Saturday. You get the new manager bounce, obviously, but they are now playing for their positions. He's going to come up with different ideas. Obviously. Will it help the Brazilian lads? I don't think that'll be an issue. I think they were all right with themselves. I don't think there was any issues with Cooper and the Brazilian lads. But yeah, it'll turn it around, Max. Where it starts on Saturday, no disrespect here, and please do not shout me down here. This is not getting rid of Steve Cooper and replacing him with a Nathan Jones. And I don't know disrespect to Nathan Jones or anything like that, but we've seen what happened at Southampton. I do think this is something a lot more forward thinking in what the club are doing. Yeah.
Interesting take. Thomas says, thank you for all the memories, Steve Cooper, and what you've done for Forest. Let's all get behind the lads in this club on Saturday. Come on, you Reds. Dan says, very risky from Forest. If we lose our next 5 games, then what? Do we go through the merry-go-round of managers? Tristan says, love him for getting us up, but with the players we've got, our performances have been horrific. And with that squad, and it seems like we're talking about not only on this podcast, Ross, but amongst the terraces and the Forest fans a lot, is this squad good enough on paper compared to last season? Forest without Brennan Johnson, one of our main attacking threats, of course, after selling him to Spurs. So is this squad good enough on paper, Ross? And do you think a name like Nuno Espirito Santo really can get something out of them, get a tune out of this squad, which is in poor form at the minute, which is in a real rot?
The squad's definitely good enough on paper, and the squad has the potential to be 6 points, 8 points higher up the league, if not more. And that's just from the points dropped already this season, as Steve alluded to. Luton, Man United. The squad definitely on paper it should be punching higher than what it is. And is Nuno going to be the individual to get that squad going? In his past couple of jobs, he hasn't lasted very long. And I think that can be a positive thing for the club, because he will know and want to get in and build some roots and get those results immediately, because he'll be under no illusion that that after a few games, if things aren't working, that the pressure will already beginning to build. So I hope he uses that as a positive thing to really motivate him. And look, he's got no better time in the festive run of fixtures, whereby they will have to run off empty, run off adrenaline, and finish one game, go straight on to preparing for the next. And they've got to just really use that as motivation to keep going and to try and get those points. And I think because Spurs, it turns very quickly. He'll know managerial roles in the Premier League are short term mostly. He'll be fully aware of that. So that should, I hope, add extra motivation to getting results as quickly as possible, so that he can stay as long as possible, even if in the long term he's not there for 5-10 years. Which, if he is, then that would be that would probably be very surprising. But that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I spoke to some Wolves fans today, actually, just via text message, and they said, I mean, not one had a bad thing to say about him. Wolves fans really seem to enjoy Nuno. But remember, this guy took them from the Championship to the Premier League. Worked, of course, with George Mendes, the Super League kind of agent that Marinakis does.
Still isn't he?
He is.
Yeah,
and this is where reports are saying that the appointment is coming out of. Of course, the Marinakis family have worked with Mendes before. We've seen it with Portuguese players. Go on, Steve. Do you want to jump in there? I
just want to say one thing about the squad, if I may, just quickly on the squad. This squad is far better than what it was last year. I know Brennan Johnson's gone. Okay, get that. I'm most probably going to state the obvious here. We need a striker, and I mean a striker, and we'll get one. Don't you worry, we'll get one. And I'll tell you something else we need, and we need to get one very, very quick. A goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Because we have been, and that is where I feel sorry for Coops, okay? His goalkeepers, he got to the stage where he got in the office and he just span a bottle, and whichever one it landed on, he picked, because both of them are number twos. And we saw that Friday, and that's where they need to, everything else fall into place. The midfield's fine. The defence is fine. I mean, there's this new Brazilian coming. Apparently that's done. He's a Brazilian international, so he's coming. But a goalkeeper and a centre forward, and then you've got to keep Taiwo fit, we'll be fine. Okay? The squad's far better.
It'll be interesting to see how they approach that, Steve, because to have crucially a match-fit striker, Origi just wasn't match fit when he came through the door on transfer deadline day, and Wood's been struggling for match fitness because he missed the tail end of last season as well. So to find a Premier League quality, Premier League experienced and match fit striker that fits what Nuno's looking for, that fits the wage bill current, that's suddenly on your guess who board is it becomes quite difficult. I completely agree. It's
I'll mention you one name. All right, Jordi Mendes.
Yeah,
the super agent. Marinakis is an astute businessman. All right, he's got his client in, and you watch.
Yeah.
But Steve, just touching on that with Mendes, we've seen him before work with Forest in the Championship, with Aita Karanka mainly, with the likes of the Portuguese lads. We had Carvalho and Goncalves. They didn't work. They were a disaster for Forest. It was, yeah, it was, Steve. But then in the same way, do you think for a Premier League football club to be relying on an agent that failed in the Championship, that this is the right move still?
Well, I don't think we're going to be getting Diaz and those type of things coming coming through a door. Listen. I was just saying, as an example, where let's not face it, Nottingham Forest Football Club is a Premier League football club, and what happened in the Championship is massive. No, I don't think it is, and I don't think the club are going to just say to Mendes, right, you're the main man, go and get us everything through the door. I don't think that works like that. What I think will happen, it will always be good to have him because they can use him as his experience, even if they don't use him. Even if they've got to try and get rid of a few players out the door. I saw, was it on Monday, that they reckon all the 4 loans are going back. Is that right? All the 4 loans are going back. And that was the alarm bells for me, Max, with Cooper, because I thought, well, if all the 4 loans are going back, they're creating space for coming in. No, I don't. I think Forest will be independent. But I think Nuno will be a little bit, he will know. I also said, after the Man U game, we don't play a league game till the 21st of January. Is that true? Is Brentford?
Yeah, it is.
We have one cup game.
We've got the cup game before.
So, he will assess that squad. And I just think on my personal level, I said to you on Friday night, Max, we're desperate for a good goalkeeper. And we're desperate for a centre forward. We know that. Everything else fits into place for me. For that, where we are, when that would get us up the league. We just can't score goals.
And that is the big problem.
You've got to score goals to win. And something else, Max, I'll say this. I think at the minute, unless Nuno can do a brilliant job in 3 days, on Saturday, if we're going to win on Saturday, we've got to score 2 because Bournemouth will score. All right. So to win that game, we've got to score more than 1 goal. Now, we'll most probably win 1-0 on Saturday.
Yes. New manager bounce. And remember that Forest, since coming into the Premier League with Steve Cooper as manager, conceded 40 points from a winning position. Again, that's a very concerning stat. Ross, when we look at Nuno in more detail and think about the style that he might bring, he often would play 3 at the back with Wolves. But this is a manager that a lot of people from an outsider point of view are saying, hang on a minute, this is quite like for like with Forest. This is a little bit like we're getting rid of Steve Cooper, maybe, well, obviously because of the results, but also because of the formations and the tactics that Steve Cooper's been implementing. But Nuno will come in and potentially play the same style as Forest, low block, and play quite defensively. And he won't know his starting 11 yet. He'll probably be relying on first-team coaches for that on Saturday. And I suppose that's a bit of a problem as well. What do you expect Nuno to bring to Forest in terms of a style of play, Ross?
Yeah, it's a good question. And certainly if he emulates that style, if he's got only a couple of days on the training pitch, it does make sense to start with what the players will already know in terms of one another's positioning, where they are on the pitch. And then as Steve says, then after that break, is going to be able to then impose his style. But at the moment, that the priority has to be that motivation, and I think he will bring that energy. He'll come in and I think he will be a motivating, inspiring guy. As I said with Wolves, he certainly had the players and the fans sort of eating out of his palm. And if you can do that and get us through into January, just get a few points over that Christmas window, then that's brilliant. And he's got time then to impose his style and then see where recruitment lies. Steve, again, he's hit the nail on the head. Is that the last few windows have been, they've been a bit bizarre. Last January, Shelby, Wood. Strange. Then over the summer as well, it was just Ola Aina initially, and then not a lot, and then loads on January transfer deadline day. So what Cooper's sacking today really doesn't really answer as well is what is that long-term strategy for recruitment, head coach style of play, and where the club wants to be in 2 to 3 years' time. Okay, we know roughly that they want to be pushing that top 10, but is the behind-the-scenes infrastructure geared towards that? And has this head coach appointment today helped them to implement their strategy for Nottingham Forest? And we don't know. We don't know that. And hopefully, Ross Wilson, as the executive, is got a good enough steer as well to be able to help the Marinakis not just lurch between decisions, but get that long-term plan in place. And is Nuno part of that? We don't know, but one thing's for sure: we'll get behind him and try and get through this Christmas period with a few more points, some energised displays. And then, in January, take a bit of a pause, get that goalkeeper, get that striker, and then, but not just lurch into recruitment as well. So, it's a bit of a rabble, but lots to do.
A lot to do indeed. You don't envy the job sometimes of a football manager. Good point here from Pete. He says you can get whatever players are on Mendes' books that you want. It doesn't mean they'll perform. It's team ethic, team spirit, and team mindset that gets the results. Look at our promotion season, the team ethic that got us up. Chelsea with all their top players shows you it's just more than super agents and big names. Robert here says the alarm bell should be the deterioration of the relationship with the squad. Can understand the new players, but the relationship with the likes of Worrell is the bigger issue for me. We've got to touch on that. Steve, this was reported earlier today by The Telegraph by John Percy, who reported that Steve Cooper fell out with Scott McKenna and with Joe Worrell, to the point where Joe Worrell was told he wasn't going to be in the matchday squad for the Villa game where Forest won 2-0. And that ended up with Worrell training away from the squad. Problems like that often seem to be leaked and appear in the media when a manager is under pressure. But you're shocked that Forest's club captain would have fallen out with a manager like Steve Cooper?
Yeah, I am. I didn't see that article, mate. So I didn't see that article. Yeah, it was news to me. I heard whispers of it, and then there were photos of him on the training ground, with the players. So I just took it as tongue in cheek. Listen, player power, players, whatever. I don't know the ins and outs of that. What happened? I suppose the Aston Villa, was that the game after Luton?
It was.
Was it directly after Luton? Yeah, directly after Luton.
I think so.
Yeah.
Steve.
So I suppose, well, Joe did take a bit of a barrage against Luton, didn't he, for his performance coming on? And I'm not saying he deserved it in anything whatsoever, so don't anyone have a go at me here. But yeah, when you start falling out with your players and your club captain, you might have and if results are not going well, you tend to get a problem, don't you? I think you're getting that problem. If you fall out with someone, Max, and you're getting the results, then it's not an issue, is it? It's that side of the fence. It really, there isn't a middle ground. It's that or it's this. And I think he fell out with Worrell. And it's
a very good point, Steve, isn't it? It's a very good point, and it's the same that a lot of people have talked about today, that potentially Cooper has been papering over the cracks for the Marinakis family and for off the pitch issues. All of these off the pitch issues come to light when the team on the pitch isn't playing. It's the same with all football clubs, the same with Chelsea, the same with Man United. It always happens. And just touching on that, Ross, Cooper did a brilliant job of creating a squad atmosphere, a squad culture, a city that was combined and that was all kind of rooting for Forest. What do you think? The new manager, the new head coach that will probably be announced tomorrow or the day after, and it looks like it will be Nuno Espirito Santo. What do you think he has to do to get the fans on board?
Yeah, so for me, Steve Cooper wasn't just a fantastic head coach. He was fantastic at all the PR around it as well. So through his interactions with all the media outlets, he came across as professional, courteous, and he correctly identified that it was more than just about him. It was about the club. And you see that through other coaches as well, that, as I said earlier on the podcast as well, are coming through that FA coaching system. Rob Edwards does very similar with Luton, from what I gather as well, and also Gareth Southgate as well. That sort of that M&S look, that just really making it not just about him, but about the wider context. Head coaches need to do that to save their job these days. They need to get the press, they need to get the fans on board, because otherwise, if the fans turn, the owners will go, they don't like him, so I'm going to sack him. So Steve Cooper did an incredible job and had, more lives than a cat. And then he got out of the job because he had the fans on board. And then because the owner was like, "Oh, I think this is going to be a PR issue if we sack him." Earlier on in the Premier League tenure, it's been very easy to do that. But because he's been well coached with dealing with the media, dealing with the PR matters, he was unsackable. And of course, he was a fantastic head coach as well. I'm not just saying he was playing the media, but I'm saying that was a big part in why he was in the job for as long as he was. So what does Nuno need to do now, or whatever new incumbent needs to come in? They need to come in with energy and with passion, and that desire also to connect with the fan base, and to know that brings results. The City Ground is a fantastic place to be a head coach if you're willing to engage with the fan base, and also if you're willing to also show that energy and that passion. So I think he needs to do exactly what Steve has done: be professional, be courteous, be honest. And to try and bring the fans on board with the journey for the rest of the season, and then hopefully the results, there'll be that relationship between fans and on the pitch, and the results will come, and of course sort the away form out as well.
Fingers
crossed.
crossed.
4 points from the next two will be great. 4 points from the next two, fans will be thinking, okay.
Steve, and just finally then, to kind of finish us off, do you agree with what Ross said there? And huge game on Saturday against Bournemouth. Yeah. It seems like, speaking to Dave on the podcast, and he said it seems like we just never are able to beat Bournemouth. But new manager bounce, how can you see it going? And do you think that Nuno, if he is the guy to come in tomorrow, or when it's announced, he is the guy to turn it round for Forest?
Well, first, the last question, I do think he'll turn it round, and I do think, I'm not saying he is the guy to turn it round. I was hoping Steve Cooper would have turned it round, but that's not happened, so we have to now move on. Do I think they'll beat Bournemouth on Saturday? I actually thought they'd beat Bournemouth on Saturday if Steve Cooper was in charge, because I just thought what Bournemouth might have witnessed on Saturday with the Luton captain might have just played on their minds a little bit, and think Forest would have known. So yeah, I look, I think we'll get 4 points out the next 3.
Fingers crossed.
Minimum.
I'm just going to show this comment, Steve. Jonathan says, this is very positive. When Villa sacked Gerrard, they were 16th and they went on an April run. Forest do the same this year and make the Europa League. Who knows? Maybe one day.
There Steve, is one other thing as well. Just want to say something. The backroom staff, just quickly. We talked about the Spurs one. He had a guy with him, and I can't remember his name, at the backroom staff. And my mate from Wolves, I don't know what his name was. My mate from Wolves said if he brings his number 2 that didn't go to Spurs, yeah, you'll be fine. He didn't go to Spurs, and I can't remember his name. He's number 2. He's number 2. He didn't go to Spurs with him for some unknown reason. He didn't go to Spurs, but the Wolves lads said to me, the Wolves fans have said to me, I said, I don't see what your problem is at the minute, Forest, with having him. He says, we love him here. We'd have him back tomorrow. So
seems very positive. Ross, thank you for your time. Fingers crossed Forest can turn it round, mate. And thanks very much for coming on.
Great, no, thanks for having us. And come on, you Reds.
Yes,
come on, we'll be fine, boys. Keep the faith, everyone. Keep calm. Go and have a drink. All right, keep calm. Trust Steve. He knows.
Trust Steve. Thank you for all the comments on this live edition of Garibaldi Red on Facebook and on YouTube as Forest today sacked Steve Cooper as head coach. We'll be back later on in the week for a Bournemouth preview. And of course, if Nuno Espirito Santo, the manager that's heavily linked, is appointed as Forest manager. But fingers crossed, whatever manager comes in, we'll get behind them and hopefully better times. Remember to drop us a like, follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. and we will see you very soon. Thanks for tuning in to this special edition of Garibaldi Red. Have a great rest of your evening, whatever you're doing.